Good morning, good afternoon, and good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome back to another stream where we are live from the pond. Much has happened over the course of the last week. So much has happened for me, at the very least, and I'm sure for some of you as well. This was a weekend of conferences, both here in the States and across the pond. And I wasn't really aware that the Old Glory Club's conference had overlapped with the remigration summit that took place, and I have to go watch some of the talks that were happening there because, yes, as Steve points out, incredible things are indeed happening. Um, I forgot about the remigration conference because I've been so busy with helping get the OGCs off to a wonderful start. It was a great weekend. I'll talk a little bit about that today. But I found out that these things were happening over on the same weekend because I show up yesterday being Wednesday, and I'm there. I'm going to church. I'm there a little early to get some stuff situated for Vespers. I'm going to be out of town next week on vacation. So I was just getting things put together for paperwork because I'm on parish council. And my priest goes, you might know a little more about this than me, but were you aware of the Resum 25 conference? And I was like, and I'm having this deer in the headlights moment as I realize, oh no, how much of my power level do I want to reveal? And I was like, Resum. And he's like, yeah, the Remigration Summit 25, they just condensed it together. And I was like, yes, I was familiar with it. So this led into an hour-long conversation about just right-wing reaction and politics in the United States, as well as our friends overseas, and the functional and logistical differences between the two. And it was just this sort of wild, surreal moment where I was like, oh, I can kind of relax a little and talk about some of these things that I know, but I don't want to go too far. But nevertheless, I just thought that was really funny for me because it was like, oh, I had forgotten about the conference, and I'm now going to have to go look up the talks and see how they were. But also at the same time, he was the last person I was expecting to have these conversations about. He asked for a copy of Leviathan and Its Enemies. So if he ever finds out who I am on the internet, then he'll know that I've definitely talked about him there. Penultimo, imagine one day Prude gets asked about Geo at church. This has already happened, Penultimo. This has already happened. There was a lovely couple that got received. I know that they listen. So hi, guys. And one time his wife walked up and he says, hey, not to make this awkward, but we're big fans of the Digital Archipelago, and we hope that one day you guys do a live show and Geo comes to the States. So it's already happened. It's already happened. But as you can tell from the title of this stream, Tall Tales and Other BS, that a lot of narrative focus has been on my mind as of late, in part because every time we have a conference, especially here in the U.S., there's been a running gag amongst the organizers and the Old Glory Club Central Committee, which I'm on, about things happening abroad and at home. And usually it's like geopolitical events. Like when we had the first Sildings conference in the United States several years ago now, it was literally like a week or two before the war in Ukraine started. And then each progressive conference had led to like peace talks, the Prigozhin coup attempt, all these other things that have been going on. So it had been a wild time. And we were all kind of like gauging what the weird international news was going to be. And there was some international news, don't get me wrong. But a lot of it focused domestically here in the United States. And it led down to a particular rabbit hole of sorts. And I say rabbit hole as I'm literally on another tab looking up the story I wanted to cover for today, which happened in California. There was a fertility clinic that was bombed in California this weekend, which was really surprising because when I saw the news, I wasn't sure if it was a pro-life extremist courtesy or like similar to like the Soldiers of Christ back in the 1990s, or if this was going to be some anti or pro-choice, anti-life kind of movement. Well, and lo and behold, it was an anti-life type deal. So Prude, you picked the perfect time to stream. Now I have something to listen to while for an hour in a car. Well, you're welcome, John Slaughter. And to our friend John Slaughter, I am currently reading his latest book, or his debut novel, Crimson Veil. John is a great writer. You can go find him over on Twitter and on his Substack. But this is what I'm currently reading, and I will be reading this on the plane this weekend when I go fly out to North Carolina. So if you haven't gotten yourself a copy of Crimson Veil, be sure to go do that. John is a very good friend and a great man who is literally the closest thing I've met outside of a few others this conference who meet the equivalent of real life Giga Chads. Is the book actually good? I am 45 pages in, and it feels like if someone wanted to make True Detective a gripping novel. So yes, the book is actually good. So I would actually encourage it. So yeah, so there were a few stories I wanted to cover and to sort of talk about. I've kind of covered one of them already, but I'm going to vent about it more. The three things that I had in mind. He says, "Fine, I'll buy it." Well, you should, Mr. William Shockley. You should. I have the philosophy of see friend, support friend, have friend, and hug friend. And I also got the very rare hardcover edition of the Double Dealer, so I'm actually really excited for that. And then Robert Weisenfeld says Crimson Veil is actually excellent. So there you go. You've got high praise, not just for me, but also in the audience. And thank you, Robert, for the $2 super chat. So there are three things that I wanted to cover for today. The first one being this sort of story in California. I know a few people have already covered on it. I know Catherine D was like the first to report that this guy was an antinatalist. And then the Biden story, which I did an hour of this with Orrin McIntyre, and I feel bad for kind of recovering it, but it's important to hit home. And I know it sounds like I'm preaching to the choir in a lot of ways, but like there's an hour of really just coping and seething because it's not like we can really do anything about it. But it's important to discuss because this, I think, is going to tell us the future of where leftist institutions are going to go. And then finally, I think those would be the three things, but I'm pretty sure I'm going to go on a lot of tangents as I do. So yeah, we'll go from there. It's very funny. I'm noticing as I'm talking to you all now, the pauses and the ums and the ahs. And if you go listen to anyone's coverage of the event so far, they always give me this praise as a very technically proficient speaker. And I have a lot of public speaking experience, both with my jobs and doing speech and debate in high school and college. And it's very funny to me that when I'm live streaming, these technical flubs come out. But you tell me to go on stage and talk to a room of 200 people for 30 minutes with no notes, that's no problem. I just find that to be a funny little observation, to say the least. Yeah, we're all about the double D's, the double dealer. That's very true. We're coping, we're seething, we're sneeding. Well, man, I appreciate it. Aren't we all? So I think we'll just start with the fun one first. We'll do the OGC conference sort of recap. Great time. It was lovely to meet some of the people that were here in the audience and to hear stories about people who are in this chat that were not there in person. So I got to meet so many new people, both young and old. The audience probably definitely skewed more towards their late 20s, mid 30s, and then some outliers very early on. I got to meet the one and only, Barack Obama, which was really cool. Australian Twitter mutual who managed to show up. It's nice to see so many familiar faces as well as some new ones. And to realize that I actually have, and I'll get into this as well because I had a job interview earlier today and I have one later this afternoon. But I had this realization that I actually have some valuable skills. This isn't meant to like puff up my own ego with a pump, but it was like, and I've said it before, Americans are very politically illiterate. We have the system's greatest trick is convincing you all problems happen in Washington when so many of them happen on the local, county, and state level. And so just talking about like the grant process and how procurement and how grant funding operates on a private and public sector level is insane. So it was good to have those conversations with so many guys over drinks and cigars, although I didn't drink at all, really. I had one beer the entire weekend for obvious reasons. But it was so good also as well, just to be in this very beautiful venue. I won't say where for obvious reasons, but it was gorgeous. And I took a lot of back roads through Tennessee where we were at. And that place is very Edenic. I know the Mormons like to say, I think it's in Missouri somewhere, that they like to say the Garden of Eden is whatever. I think that the Tennessee hills and valleys and streams are probably the closest thing you get to an American Eden. And that is certainly the case. It was gorgeous to drive through. I love driving. I hate sometimes the pain of having a long car ride and a long road trip. I drove 12 hours. over the course of 2 days. I could have done it in one. I did not want to raw dog it. But I got to meet some mutuals that way as well, because I was driving. I left it like Thursday evening. I was like, oh, I'll get like halfway and it'll be fine. And you're getting my like travel after action report, because I do this all the time. Anytime I go someplace, I love telling people about the food that I had, the people that I met. It's always a wonderful thing. The American road trip is fundamentally an American experience, because I can drive for several hours and I can still be in the same state. Where if I drive for several hours in Europe, I can drive through several countries. And I think that that's always a neat thing. It's the old phrase that, Americans 100 years forever, but or it seems like a long time, but to Europeans 100 miles seems like forever, which is very true. Like, oh, that's a 4-hour drive. Like, that's fine. I'll see you that morning or that afternoon. But I was driving the first night, was on the road way longer than I wanted to. So I'm going to give a public shout out to my Twitter mutual. Hey, y'all, it's Ham. I had the pleasure of meeting him. He's an absolute Southern gentleman. And was very courteous enough to lend me some family land to rest my weary eyes for a few hours. Nothing like meeting this sort of short, bearded Southern gentleman telling me everything that's going on and then gossiping at like 3:30 in the morning before I crash. And then he's like, all right, Prude, I got to go. So if you see anyone that walks into this place that looks kind of like me, that's family, tell them Ham sent you. And if they don't look like me, there's the rifle. Shoot them. And I was already carrying, as I always do, but I just thought it was really funny to be in this middle of nowhere farmland area. It was a really lovely place, and I am very grateful. And I left him a bottle of Teeling whiskey as a thank you note. So, Ham, it was a pleasure to meet you. It was great to see you this weekend. Thank you very much. But the general vibe, a lot of conferences feel like they're kind of like vacations or bros nights out sometimes. I've been to a lot of these, both in mainstream politics and then, of course, doing the OGCs and Sildings throughout the years. I can say with general, observations that this was probably the most like mission-oriented meeting I've been to in a long time, where guys really wanted to get together and just get shit done. And so, the other members of the OGC committee had already like reviewed it on their channel. If you want to listen to them give a breakdown of the speeches, I think the one that left me with the most kind of like in my mouth was just this was a talk given by Orrin McIntyre about like the Anglo-American political tradition, Sam Francis, the revolution from the middle, and how our Republican traditions and our traditions in America about creating associations and clubs to fix things, how does that work at scale? And it was one of those that left a really big open-ended question at the end, because we don't know the answer to it. Mine sort of did as well, but mine was far more vibes-based. And I'll talk to the committee members and see if I can upload a portion of it. I spoke for 30 minutes first thing Saturday morning. I usually always speak first thing in the mornings because of my kidney transplant. They know I can't get drunk. So the organizers were like, Matt, we put you there because we know you won't be hungover. So, there you go. I appreciate my role. And it was really fun in retrospect, because I spoke immediately after, the morning after Dave the Distributist gave the opening speech. And so, Distributist, Prudentialist, the gentleman whose namesake or online namesake, who was an inspiration for my naming conventions, it was really cool. So my weird geeky parasocial moment was I got to have Charlemagne and Dave in my car, picking them up from their airport hotel and driving to the venue for a little bit. And so that was just like a geeky dream come true for like a guy who still views himself as this middling, non-influential YouTuber, which was thoroughly enjoyable. It was a wonderful time. And for those in chat that I got to meet, fantastic to meet you. There were so many great people there who are doing so many different projects, from Hurricane Helene disaster relief to looking at local politics to helping out homeless veterans to dealing with, Section 8 development housing and how do you fight that. And we talked about environmental review and politicking and all sorts of stuff. So really a lot of great things that are going on. And I would not be part of this organization. I would not be a founding member of this organization if I didn't believe that we as Americans have the capacity to do something, even if at the local level. So this is certainly a good time. It was, did Charlie ever end up cutting his hair? No, he did not. Yeah. Well, he's right. You can only really make a community of 150 or so. Yeah, that's true. It's good to see Blood Satellite in chat. He and I are going to be covering, I think in a couple of weeks, we'll be covering a good chunk of Charles Norris Cochrane's Christianity and classical culture on Do You Even Read or Dyer. I have to let you guys know that we have these little names for shows, like, the DA, Digital Archipelago, or, in this case, Do You Even Read Dyer. And I had said that without questioning anything. And I said, oh, this is the next book we're covering on Dyer. And then half the chat was like, you're talking to Jay Dyer. And I was like, no, if I ever have Jay Dyer on, something has terribly gone wrong with my content production and who I am as a human being. That will not be happening. The more I'm a rando internet fellow. Well, Vingle, you are the ultimate mod and Janny, and we thank you for it, sir. Nevertheless, so I'll leave it there. I'll take that down for now, though. But yeah, overall, it was a really good time. I thoroughly enjoyed myself. And a lot of work got done, and a lot of things are happening henceforth where people with all kinds of skill sets are coming together to see what tangible impact can we have on the country, and even if not just regionally, which is very good. Hey, let's get Jay Dyer and have him rap. People love cool shit like that. You know what? We should, just so we can say it's Dyer on Dyer, and then we never mention it again. Like, we memory hole that episode. Like, what do you mean? It wasn't there. It never happened. It never existed. So that would be actually fun to do, but just no, Dimes, just no. It's not worth the money. It's not worth the effort. So, overall, a good conference overall. I was really happy to see most of you there. It was a really good time. And then as we're doing all this, we fall down into a rabbit hole of paranoia, or so says The Guardian, because after I would go back to my hotel room where I was at, and I would check the news on my phone. I would catch up because family or whatever would text me. And I loved this because my girlfriend had asked me, she's like, oh, so what did you talk about? And I told her what I was talking about. And I said I was really happy with it. I got a standing ovation. I thought that was pretty good for the first speech of the morning. And she was like, cool, ? And then she's like, well, they liked it, so I guess it was cool. And I was like, there we go. This is the only dynamic I need to have. It's like the meme text. So like, hey babe, what's going on with the stock market? Don't worry about it. Yay. That's sort of the I'm looking forward to that dynamic, to say the least. So over the course of the weekend, however, I had found out that this fertility clinic, this IVF clinic bombing happened via a car suicide bomb online. And of course, The Guardian is giving me already a fun split. What this tells us about young men and online extremism. Not to say that this is anything new about online extremism or anything new in regards to the space, because I'm going to read a little bit of Catherine's post about it, because a lot of these ideologies are not what I would call new or young. Let me go look for it. See if I can find it while I'm looking it up here. But she had a very good post about the nature of this bombing and these sort of ideologies that come around from here. So let's go dive into that. So The Guardian writes, for those who missed out, this was in Palm Springs. I originally thought it was in Burbank. But experts say an online ecosystem that allows lone actors to latch onto fringe viewpoints is bolstering online violent extremism. Investigators are combing through the writings of a 25-year-old man who had killed himself in a large explosion outside of American Reproductive Center's an IVF facility that was heavily damaged in what they have described as an intentional act of terrorism. The suspect in the bombing, Guy Edward Bartkus, left behind writings that appear to hold fringe theories of antinatalism and nihilism, ideologies that oppose procreation and a general sense of meaninglessness of life. And Catherine had broken this down really well, an ephilist, which is just life spelled backwards. So this is sort of a pro-mortalism argument. And so, the gentleman who had done these things and had gotten censored and scrubbed out, but he had put out a website where he'd sort of proclaimed what he was doing. And so a lot of this comes from the new atheism age, but also for those who are familiar with the works of like David Benatar, who published Better Never to Have Been, that argues existence itself is harm, because an absence of pain is good and the absence of pleasure only matters if you're forced to miss it. So this is where also you get the term antinatalism from. And so, this is from an older time of the internet. We're talking back when you could still do reply videos on things like this. Bartkus cited Adam Lanza as inspiration, which I know Catherine has spent a very good chunk of change talking about in her online career. But it's also kind of humorous, and she notes the same thing that came to my mind, was that this is the logical conclusion of such an ideology, but also at the same time an inherent contradiction, because the gentleman who committed this act of terrorism, had a friend of his in her own life, and he had let him affect her, or affect him. Her death affected him to a point that he felt the need to do something. So obviously, life mattered to him, or the life of his friend mattered to him. So there's some innate contradiction there. But I mean, these groups are also out there, and not to mention, like, you have sort of like these Zizian types, which are these like strange transhumanist transgender terrorists that I think have already claimed responsibility for killing that Border Patrol agent in Vermont, either earlier this year or last year. My timeline is not 100% offhand on that I can recall, but it really does illustrate that this is sort of this low-level kinetic activity that's taking place, and these are the political ideologies that are motivating it. And so there were a few, and I just thought it was really funny because earlier today I was filling out a job application, and the job application was for grants and things like that. My day job, things that I do for a living. But it was with a pro-life organization, and I just thought to myself, oh man, kind of how timely these things end up coming up in your life. But it really does illustrate that, like, these debates that we're having now does really promote some of the fringest of the fringe to take action. Obviously, these are the differences between various online communities and their groups, because at the end of the day, we kind of know which side has these carte blanche, or at least some kind of people will look to the side, or the state will look to the side when it comes to acts of terror. We certainly know it's not the right. The right doesn't really commit terrorism in a way that is akin to what we saw in the 1970s, or even more recently now, with groups shooting up ICE detention centers, vans, attacking vital infrastructure, and the rest. A lot of these are sort of these smaller fringe radical groups, whether they're, environmental anarchists, whether they're transhumanists, transgender radicals, or in this case, pro-mortalism, pro-death, that to exist is to be painful, and it is better to never have been. I feel so terminally millennial and terminally Reddit that I can't help but describe this ideology as like the Mr. Meeseeks of ideology. Like, existence is pain, so it's better to just not exist, or to do your task and then to die, which is incredibly depressing. But nevertheless, this sort of becomes these abstractions. And it's not like I'm unfamiliar with these ideologies. Longtime viewers of the show, or even newer viewers, know that we spent 3 episodes covering spinal catastrophism, which the first 2/3 of the book offer this really interesting analog of the spine being a geological record of evolution, and we're all trying to escape pain and trauma, and that consciousness is the ultimate way to escape that. And then how does Thomas Moynihan conclude the book? He says that we should all die, we should all redact ourselves, and we should do everything possible to ensure that we destroy this earth so well that no other form of sentient life, or any life at all, can ever come from the ashes. And we should do it on a galactic scale if possible. What a ruined orgasm of a philosophy text. Just, good Lord, why just... I almost regret reading it. And then I thought it was really funny a few months ago that the publisher of that book decided to go out of their way and be like, well, if you want to know more about spinal catastrophism, Mr. Prudentialist has like done a pretty in-depth review. And I'm like, I know that they didn't watch that video, because they don't, that's the thing about like lefty theory books. It's either read by other theory cells, or it's read by right-wingers that want to understand and like grok some of these ideas and then take them somewhere else. And I'm like, I know they didn't watch that video. I know that they didn't watch the other 2 parts. I know that they didn't watch the whole idea where I compare that whole text to really bad sex, which is crude enough as it is, and forgive me for doing so. But it is kind of, I don't really else know how to describe it, because for those who watch those episodes, I was really enjoying myself, and then we got to the end. So out of all these things, what I find most intriguing is that we're now at a point where both on sort of the, like, I don't want to say even the phrase dissident right, but like even people on this section of the right and even some of these fringier ideologues and groups online, they'll have no problem telling you that that we're all noticing the same problems. We're all noticing the same issues, that discourse is kind of dying. We all know that marriage rates are falling. The country is perpetually falling into a low trust hellhole, primarily driven by immigration. Being able to afford a house is impossible. The number of deaths of despair and from drugs is increasing. We haven't held pharmaceutical companies accountable. The Sacklers can get off scot-free. And so everyone's kind of aware that, for lack of a better term, everything is bullshit. And that was sort of Dave's big point on his Friday night speech right during dinner, was that everyone knows that it's bullshit. We all can notice and look outside our windows that we live in a cyberpunk dystopia where people are cutting off parts of their arms to make penises, and that they want to euthanize children in Canada. This is where we're at. And we are running with the same sort of things that you would see in a CD Projekt Red thing with 2077, because like even in there, those advertisings, it's like, look at my interracial family defending itself with the Second Amendment. It's just like, gee, it's like the Republican Party of today, where it's like, let's run another interracial couple in the Deep South as a Republican with a black guy at the head of the ticket. That did not do so well during some of those Senate runoff races in 2020. Didn't do so well in other parts of the midterm elections that followed. Nevertheless, the Republican Party does not learn, nor does it refuse to. It doesn't seem to read the room. And then that's where you can get people going so far to the other side, where they're just like, well, Gavin Newsom, he's the real guy. And I'm like, that dude's a sociopath. But yes, at least he has a large white family. So it's pretty crazy to think that that's where we're at. But all sides are kind of there at the same time. And I think everyone's kind of like the kid from The Incredibles on his tricycle, because he watches on one time he bikes on by and he sees Mr. Incredible just get so frustrated. Like he lifts his car ready to like throw this piece of garbage into the ground. And he's like, well, what are you looking at? And he's like, I don't know, something exciting to happen, I guess. And we're all kind of there with this bated breath about wanting something exciting to happen. And exciting can be defined in a lot of ways. Thankfully, as the theme of the Old Glory Club's conference which was the road ahead. And a lot of us are like, no, we need to take action and organize and do things, not in a way that requires you to act as previous groups have done. Yes, of course, there will be conferences. Yes, of course, we're going to be engaged politically, but also we're more primarily interested in the things that we can do feasibly, and then let that momentum grow into being something bigger. Whereas for this, I mean, regardless of your position on IVF or whatever, this was his strikeout. Someone had died that was close to him, that meant something in his life. And seeing no other reason to exist, he thought, well, why not take someone with me? Or why not take those with me? Or even at least try and do damage to the clinic. And so a 25-year-old man, seeing no real reason to exist and to live, takes himself out. And so, I mean, he has his reward. It's not my place to pass judgment. I have a good idea of what's already happened to him, but nevertheless, do I see this as a sign of more things to come? Potentially. I think that the FBI will probably investigate a few things. I don't think this was anything sanctioned by some of the far left activists inside of our intelligence communities. But nevertheless, these things are out there, and that these ideologies are going to, of course, inspire crazy people. And I don't know if I can even call him, I mean, for us, we would say absolutely, he's insane. But like in that community, he's just taking their beliefs to the logical conclusion, which if you are a believer in that, then I suppose that is the only conclusion, is to make sure life cannot happen and to take yourself with it, which is incredibly depressing, because yes, there's inequality in life. There are hierarchies. There are things that are obviously real, the haves and the have-nots. There are differences amongst groups, and there are groups that organize better than others, some that have better impulse control. And we all like to, outsource this dialogue to conversations about chihuahuas and pit bulls, because we don't have a society where we can have these kinds of conversations. And that's where we're at. And so he blows himself up. And will that clinic ever recover? Maybe, probably. It doesn't seem too terribly damaged, but only time will tell. But are we going to see more left-wing terrorism happen in this country? Oh yeah, that's for sure. And so you'll get these tall tales about why it's such a valiant cause and a valiant struggle. And even then, um, you have the same thing happening here in with other groups taking action. Luigi Mangione is, still one of them. You had a gentleman from Chicago over the course of just the last couple of days kill two members of the Israeli embassy, one of whom was a Christian, and guy from Chicago, Hispanic, saying "Free Palestine" and things like that. It's unfortunate that this guy is even in the country to begin with, the shooter. And then two, like, because of the issue regarding the conflict in Israel and Palestine, it's hard for us to even cut through the weeds of what needs to be discussed. But there is the cut and dry issue. This person murdered two people. He is making himself out to be a political martyr, which is only going to reinforce a very pro-Israeli position amongst the rank and file GOP. And then at the same time, the left is left holding the bag, so to speak, that they are corralling a bunch of radical, murderous groups of various political ideologies, ethnic backgrounds, that would love to do what this gentleman did to people that look like you and I, and would love to do it to the rest of the country. This is the same way that you see like Asian immigrants that come into the country get super excited to talk about the Civil War and the defeat of the Confederacy and how they lament that Reconstruction never went so much further. And it's like, well, what were you going to do? One, you have, I don't think Kim or Yang Sung or whatever is going to be found on the Civil War registry list. My family names will be, both my maternal and my paternal side, both for the Confederacy and for the Union. But nevertheless, are you going to do anything about it? You weren't there. But it's this claim. It's these consensus mythologies that liberal ideologues and really just the American government writ large has built for itself. Because, around the time of the 1920s and 30s, we really begin to see these revolutionary groups, some Jewish, some, Middle and Central European, that are advocating for like the destruction of these places. And by places, I mean nations, home, ethnos, these ideologies that are meant to institute this kind of strange chiliastic, they're all like some Christian heresy, but also, as Cudahy points out in The Ordeal of Civility, it's also to sort of bring about this messianic age in which they rule over us. And so you're seeing this sort of acceleration to that eschatological moment for a political reality. And of course, it kills millions every time. And of course, it doesn't work. And instead, you watch embittered people try and survive and endure. And now we're in this age where all of a sudden that can be anybody who wants to take up and be a political martyr. And I feel bad because I'm online enough to remember some of the names of people that do these things for a variety of causes, and how it kind of can look silly, or it can be, like Aaron Bushnell burns himself on fire, and he's trying to emulate the Buddhists that had burned themselves because the president and the one who was leading Vietnam with the United States was a Christian. And it was meant to sort of strike out against the ongoing presence and the ongoing authority during that time. And of course, they're all trying to replicate these civil rights, anti-war efforts from the 70s and the 60s. And we live in a radically different country, and we live in a radically different time. And so, Aaron Bushnell lights himself on fire, and he's, claiming that he's doing this to stop the war in Gaza. And regardless of your position on that entire conflict whatsoever, everyone noticed immediately after that he decides to burn himself and self-immolate in this act of political protest. You can't even say the phrase "rest in power," because rest in power is reserved for blacks and not for white people who decide to burn themselves to be a martyr to a political cause. We all fight in wars of religion in the same way that the Episcopal Church doesn't worship Jesus Christ. The Episcopal Church worships refugees and non-white people, and will encourage that kind of existence, because that to them and to all leftists, a refugee just means to make the country less white. That's all that means. It just means to make America functionally less America. Let a million Somali Minneapolises bloom. Let all the flags change. Let all these memories change. And that's how it's going to be. And in fact, that's something that Theodore Judson writes about during these troubling times as America comes to collapse. That because America becomes this polyglot nation of hell that the names change, and they do it on purpose. So they forget about what America used to be. Your last name is not O'Neill. Your last name is Ogallala now, about some Indian tribe. So you understand that you can't think about the past. To understand the past means that it exists and it lives somehow. Ergo, kill it. Rename yourself. And we're kind of seeing this strange thing now, because now you have these strange multi-ethnic coalitions that are all really predicated on the destruction of states and societies, whether you like them or not. And to some extension, they also mean the United States. And they get funding from various groups and places, both foreign and domestic. And we don't want that. In the same way that I can listen to people like Barry Weiss complain about Qatari money, but I don't think she would like if I pulled up APAC or something like that, you know? And it just illustrates the absolute mythological, but also just like the narrative shit show that exists in American politics. It is incredibly schizophrenic in the sense that like the lines are so jutted and spread out rhizomatically that it's very difficult to get to a root cause or a root source. And people love to do that. Like univariate analysis is oftentimes very flawed on a lot of issues. Sometimes it works, but most of the time it doesn't. I would say it's like 80-20. 80% of the time it doesn't work. But like people have made their careers off of trying to provide a univariate answer or a univariate analysis as to why things are the way that they are. And it's particularly wild to me to watch that because, I think that's why it made intersectionality so work, is that it tried to create a unified hypostatic union between all these disparate political groups. Like I've said before, it doesn't matter that you are a white woman aged 45 living outside of Denver, Colorado, whose big passion project is the reduction of animal cruelty and industrial grade farming, and you volunteer and you donate to PETA, the People for Ethical Treatment of Animals. Kind of kooky. You might have some very socially conservative opinions. You might be a TERF. You might be like an anti-trans person. But because you're on the sort of left-coded coalition, you now have to be on board with all these things. And if you're not, well, then you're going to get in trouble real quick because you don't want to be racist. You don't want to be a bad comrade. Now, do you? You don't want to endure the struggle session and just, sit there uncomfortably as this giant 6-foot Norwood 3 monster with fake bangs tries to tell you that it's a woman. And there's that great Zero H.P. Lovecraft tweet. This image is Jungian. Do you see how different these two creatures are? And so it's particularly insane to watch that take place because, you get all these sort of liberals and these sort of center-right guys that are trying to explain, oh, no, this is the real cause behind wokeness. This is the real cause behind these progressive issues and why things are the way that they really are. And that's how we're really going to be able to tell you how things go. And I mean, James Lindsay is a really good example of this. I was really surprised that nobody at the conference made an Arby's joke at all. It seems like both James Lindsay and Representative Nancy Mace both have meats just in different places. And they're talking about, at least in James's side, with that whole discussion with Jordan Peterson, to a point where he's not even calling himself a liberal anymore. And you have to ask yourself, well, why do we care about these lolcows? One, these lolcows are well-funded. They're well-funded. They all communicate. They organize in group chats just like you and I do when we wanted to put out a meme or a plan of attack. Secondly, they take money from people that are way richer than you and I. I get money from you lovely people. If I had a backer, I would be driving a much nicer car, and I wouldn't be too worried about a job because I'd be doing this full time. Which means that they're probably funded by some very shady and sketchy actors. I would obviously include Mr. Lindsay in that regard. But because he's had this big blowout, and I have to make it's humorous because I talked to Dave and Oren about this weekend, and he says this is actually a good thing. Like his call out is really good because he's not really going to recover from this because even these other liberal, disaffected liberal types have to distance themselves from a guy that they've relied on now for years. And I mean, that's the thing about James is like, he's not Sokol. This isn't like the Sokol affair of the 90s. Like when Sokol did that, he was also a well-established academic who had co-authored or written hundreds of papers and was still respected in the academic community. You are a disaffected white new atheist who wrote 2 books about rationality and the need to not have God. And then you did this. And that was your claim to fame with like Peter Boghossian and others. And now you've burnt out the last of your goodwill. And you took an Arby's meme about like, unlike your dad, our like cheesy beef and cheddar will come back or whatever. And he did the same thing that you and I would do. Like, I see the dad joke and I'm like, there's a racially coded way to read that message. James just goes out and says, this is woke right messaging. This is so bad for Arby's to do such a thing. And I'm like, wow, like we live in his brain so rent free that he couldn't help but look at that tweet from Arby's like Twitter account and just assume black people. Well done, James. We appreciate it. Thank you very much. Nevertheless, it does illustrate for people like you and I that like you can mentally buck break people. And a lot of these gentlemen do not have very good psychosecurity. In the same way that a lot of the things that we talk about at these conferences kind of already get ushered out into the ether. There was a great speech. It was like a 15-minute presentation about how all these disparate right-wing groups during the Spanish Civil War, presented by Carl Dahl, who talks about the Spanish Civil War a lot on Pete Quinones' channel. Really happy to meet him. He's a really jolly guy. And he's just like, have fun as he's talking about, this bloody conflict in the 1930s Spain. And immediately that rhetoric had been deployed by Orrin McIntyre yesterday talking to Doug Wilson, who I'm not in on the Reformed Christian nationalist circles for obvious reasons. I'm not a part of the Reformed tradition. I wasn't, I was nominally raised in it, but I had no real understanding of Christianity growing up at all. And like a lot of young people who were later millennials, I had a large atheist streak in me, or an agnostic kind of libertarian thing where I was like, no, I think this HBD stuff makes sense. But like, God, this is me from like 10, 15 years ago, much different person than I am today. But even Orrin had called him out on it. He's just like, listen, the reason why you get Francos and you get leaders like Franco is because the center right fails to do its job. And I think it's at like 57 minutes, 38 seconds if you want to go see that clip. Because like Orrin just like murders the man on live television. It's wonderful to watch. And so everyone kind of sees past everyone's bullshit. Everyone kind of sees past everyone's BS. Like, we know how this game gets played. And I feel like that the meme where I think it's like Donald Duck and Mickey talking to one another. And I hate that I'm even saying like, oh, that meme. You know what I'm referencing. Because we live in a very pictographic society now. We've become so orientalized, or we've regressed in our forms of technology, that we've hybridized the memes and the dialectical power that they have behind it. But it's like I think it's like Donald saying something like, we're all just chemicals or whatever, it doesn't matter. And then Mickey goes, coward that you are. So will you rise? Will you fight? Or will you die like a dog? Everyone on all sides of these like non-mainstream political groups is at that point. Like, will you die like a dog, coward that you are, or will you actually do something? And will you accept the fact that there are people further to the right than you who want the same issues to be resolved? I think we all know the answer to that with these guys. And so while I'm not really all in on the CN circles, I think America would do much better under a muscular, vitalistic form of Christianity that used to rule this country from like 1650 to like today, or from 1650 to say like, I don't know, 1890. That would be great. But nevertheless, a lot of work would have to be done to get there. And a lot of these, and even I said this during the Q&A at the conference, that's also going to require a lot of young men who are willing to do the same kind of things that Ryan Turnipseed had done. And I consider Ryan a very good friend. He and I are, of course, not at the same church. He is LCMS, and I am with the Orthodox Church in America. But like, nevertheless, I see that, and I understand that takes courage. And I think that was probably something very, very, very much in the likes of Martin Luther, that he made his stand and he made his case. And I don't think he did anything wrong. Nevertheless, that's a battle that's going to have to come out. And out of all these things is that here we are. Are you willing to accept these things, and that there are men who are tired of your impotence and that want to do things, and maybe you should teach them what you know and how you got there? Or will you continue to gaslight, girl boss, and gatekeep? Well, my money is on the latter rather than the former. But as the conferences and other things like that show, for me at least, there are those out there that want to actually do something and get things done who are older. And that becomes sort of the problem with these intergenerational conflicts in general is that we have this mythology about the boomers. We have this mythology about the silent generation and Gen X and so on. We like this conflict a lot. And as I've written about in other places, if you actually show up to these things as a young person, and by young, I mean like 35 and under, people go crazy about a young person being there. They're like, oh my God, someone's interested. For instance, I participate in my county's historical society, and I like to understand the records. I've written a few grants to get things applied for, to get money to help preserve and digitize some of these records and get them scanned in high quality, and to preserve, hundreds of years old documents. And I'm the youngest person there by probably 25 years, 20 years, and I turned 30 this December. And so they were like really ecstatic that like a young person that wasn't one of their sons or daughters was interested in about the history of the county and where the markers were, where the bodies were buried, and where people called home. Most people, they don't give a shit. And I mean, that's the part about being tied to a people and to a place. My family calls this sort of region home, or at least my mother's side does. My father's side is somewhere in the Midwest. I don't see them very often, if at all. And, for someone like me, who was a third culture kid, who was raised as an army brat and moved around, the tall tales about where you're from and your family and what they've done are important. And I think most people in here have a gut check and understand that. But I mean, even for us as average Americans, the average American moves like 10 times or 10 to 12 times in their lifetime compared to a European, which I think is like 3 to 4. Depending on the country, it's even 2. So it just illustrates the night and day differences sometimes of what we're dealing with and talking about people in place. And I'll share this story, and then I'll go to the last story, or the last sort of little news thing with Joe Biden, and then we'll go to the super chats, because I realize I've been ranting now for about an hour. Was that a few months ago? I want to say it was in January or February. I was at a family reunion, and I'm the oldest of my mother's children, so I'm the one that has the most memory of where I call home and the people that are my family, even though I may have met them when I was a small child, or when I was like 8 years old, or never really met them at all because I didn't have a memory at like 2. And so every time I go, it's always a reintroduction, and it's always, oh, I'm related to so-and-so. This is how I know you. This is how we're related. But at one point in time, I also had found out from these reunions, I have a large swath of family that left Texas and went for California, and a good chunk of them still live there. I don't know them very well, and I don't intend to visit California anytime soon, but you never know what God brings you. And so my grandmother, God bless her, she is 85 years old. She goes up and she reads this letter from 1959. And it is about my family, her generation, and her cousins and the rest, and what life was like as a young person living out where I live. And of course, back then, it was far more rural than it is now. I mean, it still is pretty rural where I live, but still with some development. And I listened to the whole thing, and to listen to people who had this much close connection in place, and the things that they had done, and all the things that they considered fun, and the lakes and the places that they were, very country life, things that you would hear about in a song from that kind of era. I literally had to step outside because it had moved me to tears, which is a very strange thing to admit out loud, and it's a strange thing to even experience, because I have no connection to these people at all whatsoever. I don't work in the trades. I work as a government official. I do this online. I'm far more interested in painting. That's why it's the super chat goal for the stream. And yet, nevertheless, like, I love being outdoors. I love fishing. I love hunting. There's still very much there's some country boy in me that is just dying to break out of this monkey suit that I'm wearing. But it had moved me to tears because, like, I have no idea what that experience is. And someone just opened and read this story to you, and it just broke me, because, like, that's my family that I have no real connection to, and that I had lost by the nature and the circumstances of my job or my father's career and things like that. And I'm not really upset by that. It's the nature of my circumstances. I got all my European vacations in before I was too old to really not enjoy them. And I mean, that's always nice. And I'm very blessed for that. One of my favorite memories as a child was going to the Gothic cathedral in Cologne. And then all of a sudden, you're dealing with a world where it's right next to this museum about Colonia, where the Roman Empire had this major trading hub. And you're blown away by how old the world is. And you're blown away that these two things can exist side by side. And then I'm blown away over here to a point of emotion where it's like, oh, this is what family is like. And this is what, being tied to a place feels like. It's a very radicalizing experience. Even if you're not really like a big blood and soil nationalist, it was radicalizing enough to know that like, oh, this is home. This is where my people are buried. And there is a family lot where my family is buried out in somewhere. I won't say where for obvious reasons, but it does just tell you the power of, I don't think my family has any really major famous great men of history. I know that Paul Fahrenheit and I have family that served in the same unit during the Red River campaign during the Civil War for the South. But, and some other events that took place that have some Wikipedia articles, but nothing really that famous. But it's like, oh, I now desperately want to learn everything about where I come from and who I am. And so I did. Over the last several months, I investigated all these things. I've jokingly said I feel like I'm very more Irish than I am Scots-Irish. Turns out no. Like we can trace my family back to where in Scotland that they were from. Most of my dad's side is either from northern France and Brittany and in England. And we're also had some Scottish in them as well. So it's just like I'm in the Sandbachian circle for what is white. But it moved me. And I mean, these are the things about tall tales and sort of everyone knowing that things are bullshit. Is like, we all know what matters to us. The question now is how to preserve it and what to do and to act and to make sure that it all takes place to do so. And now we live in a society where the president of the United States, and I wrote about this for the Old Glory Club, and I can pull that up if you are also interested, because it really was just a great time to be a liar. And we all know that they're lying. We live in a Solzhenitsyn nightmare, and I'll go put this up on screen now for those that are interested. So present, share screen. But yeah, like this is what I wrote. We all know that they're lying. Lies in a long memory. I just put it out this Monday. And it was Wednesday. And it was just this incredibly frustrating fact that we all know that Joe Biden was senile. According to his own oncologists that worked on his coronavirus response, probably got diagnosed in 2021. And we know that the Republican Party probably won't do anything about it. I know Donald Trump had made some tweet about treason or whatever, but still. This all happens as Jake Tapper and Alex Thompson are about to review their new book. And as Orrin and I had simply said, for 4 years, we didn't know who the president of the United States was. And that we had a guy with an auto pen, a guy who wasn't there. We had the most televised president in the history of humanity with all these fake sets. They had that fake set where they had shown him get the shot and whatever and things like that. We know that top HHS officials didn't get the shot under this administration, and they played down the risk of everything there. And it's just like, I know that there are bigger issues than relitigating COVID, but Biden also helped accelerate the invasion of my country with millions of illegals and millions of people from the global south that should not fucking be here. And so my rage is beyond words. I am beyond pissed. And so, there was someone in the comments, and I won't read it, but he says, this is kind of this is his just reward. Yeah, but he's too old to really understand what's going on, and he's not there, and there's no accountability. I think I had said even in here, yeah, here it is. The modern American tradition of the media and political leaders disclosing the most heinous acts imaginable with an air of, well, what are you going to do about it, is a tradition I would most certainly like to see come to an end. And I really do want that tradition to die. I would love to see it die. But this is the Solzhenitsyn-esque kabuki theater. We all know that you're lying. We all know that you're lying to me. I know that you're lying, and you know that I know that you're lying to me. So what are we going to do about it? I will not echo the same sentiments that were cheered on at the Old Glory Club conference, even though I may endorse them, personally speaking. I won't ever say them out loud for obvious reasons. But it does go to show that everyone knows it's bullshit. Everyone knows that the tall tales and the idols of this age are falling because I live in a low trust society. People gloat at the destruction of my people, and that they would love to see millions of more Somalians and Indians take over the place and change names and flags like they have done for Minnesota. And I thought it was really funny because a couple of days ago, I think it was last week, the United States Army's official Twitter account had given a memorial statement to the 2 Medal of Honor winners who had served in Mogadishu during the whole incident with Black Hawk Down. And it's just like, and everyone knew. It's like, well, current day Minneapolis, current day Minnesota is a great way to honor their memory for what they had done in Somalia and giving their life for their countrymen. Like, Christ is right. There is no greater love that man hath for his friends than to lay his life down for them. But, there is no greater dishonor to a man's life and his sacrifice than to totally pave over everything that he died for and to replace it and say that it's the same thing. Fuck you. No, it's not. Everyone knows that it's not. Everyone knows that it's all bullshit. Everyone knows that it's not. And so while, we can all act like it's business as usual and that we're going to somehow get this big, beautiful bill passed and somehow the libtards are going to be defeated and the based world is back, I think even anyone who tells themselves that, they all know in the back of their head it's bullshit. There is so much more work that needs to be done. And it will be, I had said this during the Biden administration. I've not yet begun to fight. I have not yet begun to organize and to help people and to consult with others on what I can do to make this system work for you, as fucked up as it is. And it's all bullshit. I hate to be so crude and vulgar, but this is Dave and I came to the same conclusion. Like, it's all BS. We're all living in these strings of lies, and we all know where they're getting plucked and what note they're playing. We have become well acquainted with the siren song of liberal progress and ideology. We're all done because we all know that a tall tale is just a tall tale and that your belief system doesn't matter. And at the end of the day, we all know that you're lying. And so I think that was the refreshing part about all these conferences, is that I don't have to pivot or speak a different language. I can actually just be myself with people like you in chat right now and those that are going to watch and listen to this on podcasts or whatever and be like, you're right. This is all BS. We're all better than this. We all know what to do. And so now it's time to get our shit together and actually do something about it. Because if we don't, all we can simply do is impotently tweet and watch as the people tell us very clearly it's a big club, you're not in it, and that's how we're going to have to live. And that's fine. But I refuse to accept that I have to settle for that. I know that I don't have to settle for that. And then I'm going to do a lot more work to make sure that myself and those around me get done. This whole weekend, this whole last couple of weeks has been a strong reaffirmation to me about something I had said at the very beginning when I decided to make this channel. If I plant the vine and fig tree that my grandchildren will sit under and not be afraid, then I have lived as good of a life as I can as a political actor. I've done all that I needed to do. And that's all I can hope for. And for all of you here listening, thank you all for tuning in. I'm going to move to the super chats here in a minute, but this is where we're at. This is how things are. And I have this renewed sense of energy that things are either going to get done and we're going to act and do something about it, or we're going to be lulled back into the same siren song that so many of us know and just assume that everything will be fine, or that, we'll just tweet our way into base world. No, we actually have to act now. We actually have to produce culture. We actually have to produce art. And that's where we're going. And I think that that's sort of where things are. I pointed out 2 little books here at the beginning. People are trying to make things. And that's sort of the fun tweet. Like, you can just do things. That is true. You can. You actually really can if you're willing to put the effort in. Will it be good at first? Probably not. Sometimes you get bangers. And other times, it's an iterative process. But those things tell me that we have a long road ahead of us. And it's going to be there for those that are willing to take it. So with that, we'll go to the super chats and we'll enjoy our conversation with one another and the news and the like, and we'll go from there. So let's take a look here. We'll start with entropy as always, because I'm a big fan of entropy. Jay Ford sends $10 and he says, "It was great catching up again in the whirlwind of the conference. I was reflecting on your I have not yet begun to fight before God called me to the Helene affected area. God bless." That was the other thing that we had done at the conference. There were 3 men that were awarded medals for American excellence, and Jay Ford was one of those recipients. Jay Ford spent close to a year in Hurricane Helene affected areas trying to rebuild, working out of pocket, and working with everything that he could. I had consulted with him and some guys around him to help write for grants and what that process looks like and the necessity of having a 501c3. And Jay Ford spoke, and he talked about everything that had gone right and everything that had gone wrong. And I'll be perfectly honest with you, it was a lot of work that he had put in along with others that were there in the area. So I think that it certainly does illustrate the kind of work we can do, and that's the kind of action I think that's important for us to take on that. So I mean, if you ever get the chance to meet Jay Ford in person, he's a great guy, and he's someone I would consider a friend and an example for all Americans to follow suit with. Sam153 with a very generous $20. He says, thank you. He says, sounds like the OGC conference was a blast. Cheers, Prude. Well, thank you very much, Sam. I greatly appreciate it. It was a blast. And if you ever get the chance to go to one of these conferences, I know that a lot of the chapters are going to start hosting mini events in the same way that Dave has in both the US and Canada. I would highly recommend that you go. They're really worth it. Not just for the camaraderie, but also because that's really where the discourse comes out. Like a year ago, Charlemagne gave a great talk on the American Anglo tradition, the law, and the Republic. And most people don't know where that came from. It came from the OGC conference. But a lot of other people in the political conservative media sphere started talking about those things. And in fact, Orrin McIntyre's talk was directly influenced by that. One of our greatest polemical engines and posters talking about these things came out and did it. So I really do think that you can make these things can just happen. And so I'm really glad that it was a blast. And I really encourage those watching to do so. So I really think about it. I like how Orrin was calling. It's the moderate position. It's the Buchanan right position. It's just jailed, Yeah. So yeah, I think it's important to consider that. On to the super chats here. Quite a few just super chats where people don't really send anything. Son of Haster just sends a little salute. Thank you very much. We already covered this one earlier. Robert just says Crimson Veil is actually excellent. Yeah, and also like if there's ever such thing as like profile picture physiognomy, like John Slaughter on Twitter just shows his actual face, the dude fits the role for being both a leader and a guy who's probably killed people, or at least the very thing there. Blood Base since $9.99. Thank you, sir. Appreciate it. William McDuff sends the same thing. Greatly appreciate it. I'm loving the use of certain profile pictures. I'm a fan. And Sam153 sends a Canadian super sticker. Let me check entropy one more time. And then Robert sends one last one. He says, left-wing anti-Zionism is just anti-whiteism. A white guy with a MAGA hat walking through Columbia U is at much more risk than a Jewish person with a yarmulke. Definitely true in a lot of areas. That's true. I think that, but it's also, it leads, the whole issue is a mind-breaking issue because things are very dichotomous. Because I saw in a lot of the, even in London, there were protests about this, where it's like you can be on the white side of history, where it showed like France, Britain, the United States, and then Israel, and then like the right side of history with all these like third world institutions and countries. And so it's like it gets very awkward because I know a lot of Jews would not identify as white either. And the far right doesn't identify whites as Jews either. So you get into this weird polemical mishmash of shit. But also, it's not like I'm going to see an American version of the Balfour Declaration ever take place in the United States, where they all kind of get sent out or we don't want them. Not my lifetime, at the least. So that's a whole other can of worms that I'm not wanting to get into right now before I have to head off and go to a job interview with a position of public importance. But I mean, like that debate is going to be there present because some would just say, well, like that's just giving more cover for Zionism or for your certain 3-letter word of choice or calling or you're being weak on certain questions. I think if anyone on this channel wants to know my position on that, I already got like nearly 5 hours on a book that Dimes and I reviewed. So I don't want to get scapegoated or get shit tested for purity. But no, it broke a lot of people's brains. It broke a lot of like Jewish commentators' brains. It broke a lot of like nationalist commentators' brains. It broke a lot of, I mean, it kind of echoed the point like there's no such thing as like a based like immigrant or non-white character, because it's like all of a sudden they'll like immediately go back to their country of origin, and you can see this on the timeline all the time. I'm very simple in my position. I am for whatever helps people that look like me and my countrymen. And if that means that I have to get rid of a lot of people, that also means I don't want to import third world ethnic conflicts. America's business does not have to involve itself there. As a Christian, I sympathize with a lot of the Gazans and Palestinians because A lot of people there, the Christians have been ethnically cleansed, and a lot of American Middle East adventurism has led to the birthplace of Christianity being wiped out ethnically, and that pisses me off. And I think that's pretty straightforward. But outside of that, I do not want a single foreign conflict to be my fucking concern. I should concern about it when it affects my people or Europeans. Like, one of the few just wars America has fought in is the war against the Barbary pirates. And if you want to know what that looks like, go see Pope Pius VII's comments on what America did. A reformed Protestant country doing more for Christendom in recent centuries than anyone else in the West. And then Robert says, would love to go to the OGC next year, but May and early June for maybe mid-late summer next year. Well, there always will be various chapter events, Robert. So you have to just see what happens in your neck of the woods, I suppose. But I will be... well, that really wraps it up for the super chats for right now. But I'm going to be out of town next week. I'm on vacation in the Carolinas. I'm going to go fishing, and I'm going to see someone very important to my life. So I'll be doing that. However, I will have a real talk out next week, and then the week after that, Dimes and I are back live for another episode of Do You Even Read? Dyer, covering Charles Norris Cochrane's Christianity and Classical Culture. After that, Capitalissimo and I, who spoke at the event, great guy. I roomed with him. He's a wonderful gentleman. We're going to have a Discourse Corner episode out about some of the things that he talks about with his day job at this speech. So lots of good things lie ahead for all of you. My real talk that I'm going to put out is talking a lot about artificial intelligence as a weapon of war. My friend, Mr. Spader, and I had a very good conversation about this sort of thing as a weapon. So I think that you will enjoy that. And I enjoy always reading the comment section when it comes to the real talk streams. It's been a long time since I've gone fishing, but we've had so much rain in my area in the last 2 months that I could go fishing on the family pond once more and enjoy it, so it doesn't look like it's a dead puddle. Instead, it looks like it's proper, full, healthy self. So no live content next week. I will be out of town, but it was a pleasure meeting so many of you at the Old Glory Club conference. I hope that you all have a great rest of your year, and I look forward to seeing your chapters and what you guys do. So there's a lot of great stuff that lies in store for us. And then, of course, if I'm live anywhere, you guys will see it and hear from it. And then more good work to come. I feel very much invigorated to do more things. So thank you so much for your super chats, your questions, and donations. I greatly appreciate it. And with that, ladies and gentlemen, I will see you all next time. Take care and God bless.